Disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazil was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Well, welcome to UFO Classified. I'm Erica Lukes. I was happy to be here live, and I love getting into chat and seeing my people. You mean the world to me. Thank you for supporting the show, for getting in there. You are intelligent and very thoughtful, and I love that about my listeners. You are respectful, and you really want good information, and that is something that is pretty sparse in quote-unquote ufology. It seems sometimes we get pushed down rabbit holes and we're not necessarily getting good information, and I really go to the extra effort to make sure that the guests that I bring to you and the points that we talk about are factual, they're good information, and you can get an education here and not be led down a rabbit hole that isn't necessarily for your greater good. I have had, of course, a busy week investigating, doing my own personal research. And today I had the pleasure of hanging out with my friend and author, Greg Bishop, who was in town. And he'll be coming to my Halloween party tomorrow, so this will be fun. It's a couple days late, but whatever. We will have a great time. Greg Bishop has authored a couple books that are wonderful. He's been on my show before, but he's done a lot of research on Bill Moore and Doty and all of these people. And so he's an interesting man to talk to, and I really enjoy his research. Speaking of people that I find very inspirational, I have been lucky enough to find Ray Boeche. And Ray Boeche is one of probably the most humble and kind people that I have spoken with. He is relentless. When he wants to research something, he gets in there and he makes the phone calls and he tries to get good information out there. He did that with Rendlesham, the Mount Waters case, and was very instrumental in uncovering all of that. We're going to talk to him about that a little bit tonight. I have had Nick Redfern on the show several times, and have specifically each time brought up a book called Final Events, which Nick wrote after speaking with my guest this evening. Final Events is very critical to understand because right now we see a lot of dynamics taking place in the field of ufology or even in the world political stage. And I do believe that the Collins elite has something to do with what we are seeing now. Again, we'll talk about that tonight. But my guest this evening, Ray Boeche, was the founder and former director of the Fortean Research Group. The Reverend Raymond Boeche, he's so cool, has been involved in the study of unexplained phenomena since 1965. He has served as Nebraska State Director for MUFON, was on the Board of Advisors for the Citizens Against UFO Secrecy cause, and in various capacities with numerous other organizations from all over the world. He has been relentlessly pursuing unexplained phenomena. He delivered 2 papers, one of which I have in my hand, to the MUFON International Symposium. And he also was, as I mentioned, one of the primary investigators in the 1980 Bentwaters UFO incident. He also does extensive research with Men in Black and many other things. He is a true hero. Plus, he's an artist, a graphic artist and a book designer. Ray, are you like the coolest man on the planet?
Well, I'm blushing more than any other man on the planet right now, I think.
That goes back to you being humble, you know.
Well, that's quite a glowing introduction. I appreciate it. I'm blessed to be able to use the gifts I've been given and try to use them as effectively as possible. And beyond that, my work has to speak for itself.
And it does. I mean, I read what you have done, and I'm just so impressed. And sometimes you get into the field and you're trying to learn things, and you see the same handful of people over and over again, and you don't realize that there are all of these other people who have really done the hard work, and you're one of them. I can't believe what you've accomplished.
Well, thank you. I've never been interested in the pursuit of this for my own glory or for anything other than my own intellectual satisfaction. And to have the opportunity to be able to share it with people, that's a great treat. But I've been asked by several people why I haven't put myself forward more. And I've just never really seen the need to, from my perspective. But I do appreciate your kind words, Erica.
Well, and absolutely. And I think it's interesting because one of my friends and mentors is Barry Greenwood, and he, again, that's not his goal. He doesn't need this to have his ego stroked. He's doing this to do the hard work. So history will be preserved for all of us. And I respect that about people like yourself and like Barry and Jan Aldrich and all of these people that are doing all of this, and they're not in it for 10 seconds of fame.
Oh, absolutely. If I want to be certain how I phrase this. I think if you're captivated by the idea of being of getting your 15 minutes of fame, and you like that and you want to keep it, that's when I think research can get sloppy. And you're looking to maintain that notoriety rather than digging at the meat of the problem. And so, that's never been my motivation. It's always been, I find this entire field fascinating, and if I can help uncover some of the truths, I'm happy to do so.
Well, you've done your fair share. It's amazing to me. And I would love to give the audience your background. What was your childhood like? How did you become interested in this topic?
Oh man, I just flashed back to the beginning of The Jerk with Steve Martin. And he said he was raised a poor black child in Mississippi.
Oh, has to be one of my favorite shows.
No, I'm the oldest of four. I grew up in a town about 50 miles from Lincoln, Nebraska City, Nebraska. And when I was 10, during one of the major blackouts in 1965, my mother called me to the window and said, "What's this?" And we saw this spinning, glowing disc travel through the sky directly over our house and then across our neighbors. No idea what it was, but that really got my attention, and that's what got me interested in the whole field of UFOs and ultimately the other aspects of the paranormal as well. I had the opportunity as a pretty precocious young man when I was 12, the first person I interviewed and actually talked about it on KNCY, the voice and choice of River Country in Nebraska City. When I was 12 was Herb Shermer, the chief of police in Ashland, Nebraska, who had a very well-known abduction experience and had the audacity to talk with him, and that really I think sort of sealed my fate in terms of wanting to be involved in this and wanting to dig at the truth. And I've just kind of plunged ahead and not really looked back since.
So 12 years old.
Yeah, 12 years old. So I'm not quite as old as that might seem to me. I'm 63, so Yeah, I was a precocious kid, that's for sure.
Do you have that interview at all?
No, it wasn't taped. I did it on the phone and took notes, and then the radio station in Nebraska City got wind of it, and so they had a little interview session with me to discuss that. But no, it's only in the ether.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing to actually hear that original interview.
Or embarrassing. I'm not sure what. I'm not sure what.
No, but I mean, how cool is that though? You're 12 years old. You have your first experience, as a younger child, and then you're out there doing this, and you're like, whatever, I'm just gonna do it, going for it, and that's amazing. That's cool.
Yeah, I had more courage than common sense sometimes, I think. But
the follies of youth,
So yeah, that's how I got started, and I began then to develop some relationships with folks like John Keel and Ivan Sanderson. Jerry Clark and Lauren Coleman have been longtime friends and correspondents. Had a great relationship with Alan Hynek over the years. Leonard Stringfield, a number of Gray Barker. Who's kind of on the wackier side of the whole flying saucer question, but I've been fortunate to reach out to people and have them respond, and so they were always very encouraging, and to sort of in a sense be mentored by people like Keel and Sanderson and Hynek. That's pretty good training.
And I am very envious, I have to say right now, because they talk about some big boys and just learning from them, and Keel especially. What's your favorite memory of talking to John Keel?
There were several phone calls in the late 60s. Some beginning just after the collapse of the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant. It was interesting to contrast his confusion, his awareness, his insight at the time with his later. He really didn't change his mind on anything, but as he grew older, he just got crustier. And I don't know a better way to put it than that. John was he was a wonderful guy, but he could be quite a curmudgeon at times. So it depended on what mood you caught him in.
That doesn't sound like anybody else in the UFO field, huh?
No.
Wow.
It was John was an interesting man. I think one of the most important conversations I had, at least that sticks in my mind, was in 1968, and I was just on a Travel Channel show, Most Terrifying Places in America, talking about an area south of Nebraska City, a little town that used to be and is no longer, called Minersville. In 1968, there were an outbreak of Bigfoot sightings in that area, and there had been reports of things like that from, my grandfather was born in 1891, and he remembered as a child stories all along from Peru, Nebraska, 20 miles north to Nebraska City, the bluffs along the river, tales of hairy wild men and black panthers and just strange things that had happened there. So it was very much seemed to be a window area. And it was fascinating to talk to John Keel because he was, when this started to crop up, because then John pointed out the comparisons between what were some of the things that were being seen and happening in the Minersville area and those things that were going on around Point Pleasant. So that's maybe my most memorable conversation with him. I was quite taken with that at the young age of 13, 14. So,
I mean, what an amazing experience. And you, when we had our last conversation, we talked about these window areas because they're so intriguing to both of us. And I love that your grandfather, I mean, you've had these experiences and you understand the importance, and you've spoken to Keel about these window areas.
Yeah, it's there is just something. The television crew and the other guests that were involved in this production with the Travel Channel, it is a remarkable area, and it is just as bizarre at times as anything that happens in Point Pleasant ever was. It's fascinating, and I don't know what it is. It's the closest I can come is, and I think Keel really nailed it. It's like a thin spot between dimensions, and things tend to pop through. Minersville's also had a number of reports of large winged humanoids, sort of like a Mothman kind of creature. A lot of UFO sightings. Yeah, it's just one of those areas that, in a sense, like Skinwalker Ranch, that if you spend a lot of time around Minersville, you would not be surprised to see a portal open and and something crawl out. It's just that kind of area. And
I will tell you, depending on what crawls out, that might not be the best day for you. But
that's right. That's right.
Oh, yeah, it's interesting because I was recently up, about 3 months ago, I went up near Skinwalker Ranch and I interviewed Junior Hicks. And I have I've got 2 hours of video interview with him, and my production guy is working on that so I can release it. But he mentioned a sighting with a man and his friends that were out driving at night, and they were on the Indian reservation, and something kind of attached itself to the side of his truck and then reached this hairy hand in, and this fellow snapped 3 pictures of it. One of the hand, one of the eyes, the glowing red eyes, and then another one of kind of more of a facial with the horns. And I mean, it was just like, wow, what is this?
Now, were you able to? Did you see the photos?
You know what? No, but unfortunately, what had happened is this fellow was so scared. I mean, he had claw marks all over him, and he went to the local shaman. The shaman came over and just said, "You've got to burn everything."
That's again. I'll throw another parallel out of a local farmer that I worked for, off and on during summers and winters as well. In 1969. My best friend and I decided we really wanted to get permission from the landowner and go spend a weekend or several days or the summer camping down around there. And this man, who had been a tank commander in Patton's Third Army, one of the most fearless men I've ever known, told me this story once, and he never repeated it. He said, "You go down there," he said, "and I'll come down and drag you back," because he said it's not safe. He rented 5 or 10 acres of land that he would always plant to watermelons and sell those at a farmer's market. And he was down there. This was right between the Missouri River and the bluffs along this area near Minersville. And he'd gone down, stopped to check on his watermelons one late afternoon, early evening. And he was standing there facing east, looking out over the field. And he saw this long, extended shadow coming up behind him, because obviously the sun was at his back and setting. And he assumed it was the farmer he rented the land from, who had spotted his truck and just stopped to chat. And he said, "All I can tell you is," he said, "I turned around, and what I saw, I never want to see again. And I left the entire crop of watermelons. I never went back. And this was not a man who you would think of as ever being frightened, but he would not talk about it. Other than that, he wouldn't describe it. He just said, "No, there's something down there, and you go down there, I'll drag you back out." So it was,
wow.
It was quite an experience. I still kind of regret that I never got down there to camp, but
it's probably good.
Probably just as well.
But isn't it fascinating? I mean, in all of your research, and I mean, I look back at all of this and all of the witness interviews. I mean, there are people that are just earning a living. They're going about their daily routines, and then something like this just slaps them in their face and changes their life forever.
Absolutely. It gives them an entirely different perspective on reality than they ever had before. And I understand the fright. I understand the confusion and the fear, but I think it's a very valuable thing that people wake up and understand there's more to this world than what we can see, feel, touch, and smell. There's a realm of existence beyond the physical, and there are things that we just don't know. I don't think we should be afraid of them. I think we should approach them with a great deal of respect. But I find it fascinating, and I think it's some people are able to handle it in a way that is very positive. Other people just sort of shut down and can't cope with it.
And then that is so true. It's interesting because I look back at some of the experiences I've had with some paranormal phenomena in my home or different things. And most people, I'll tell them what happened to me or other people in the surroundings. And, oh, I would be so frightened. I'd be terrified. And to me, it was like, okay, it was just an interesting experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's the only time I have truly been terrified at something odd, and I'll kind of lay the groundwork for this. Are you familiar at all with the Dr. Herbert Hopkins, the medical doctor in Maine?
No.
He was an MD in Maine. He used hypnosis in his practice for anesthesia for smaller procedures.
I've got to cut you off right there because we've got 1 minute to break. Well, actually, now we're going to break, so we'll talk about him when we get back.
Perfect.
All right, America Lukes. This is UFO Classified. I'm here with Ray Boeche. We will be right back.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes. Erica Lukes. The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified. UFO Classified with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Here's what happened on the last episode of Three Guys, No Ties.
I picked up my daughter, and she was suspended for 2 days in school for bringing her horny toad there. So I worked for a law firm, which the owner of the law firm then paid money to get my daughter's horny toad registered as an emotional support pet. So my daughter can take that horny toad.
Three Guys, No Ties. Wednesday nights, 7 to 9 Pacific on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is your captain. I'd like to welcome you on Jackpot Airlines Flight 1610, service to Lost Wages.
They say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, apparently, they need a reality check done Vegas style.
Vegas, 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 Vegas.
Tune in Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern, for Reality Check, hosted by Jessica Johns, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Biggest star in the world, bigger than Britney and Christina put together.
If it's happening on the Vegas Strip, you'll know about it here first.
You are a dirty little fun haver.
Join Jessica Johns as she explores and goes behind the scenes of what's hot and what's not. From the best entertainment Vegas has to offer to national celebrity gossip.
That's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Jessica has her finger on the heartbeat of the city, and she's waiting to share it with you. Reality Check, hosted by Jessica Johns, Wednesday, 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 a.m. Eastern. She does Vegas right.
Yeah, baby.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. How could you not love him?
Hamilton the Pug's adoption story started at a shelter. Visit theshelterpetproject.org to find a pet near you. Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
One of the planet's most powerful antioxidant products is here for you to enjoy. Chaga Mushroom Tea. This tea has been used as a potent natural health solution for thousands of years. In fact, the Chinese call it King of the Herbs. The health value alone is worth a look, as Chaga Mushroom Tea packs a punch with pure vitality and smooth energy. It's 100% wild crafted, safe, and effective. Get it now at arcticchaga.com. That's ARCTICCHAGA.com, or call 916-969-2678. That's 916-969-2678. Chaga Mushroom Tea. Chaga Mushroom Tea. Order your supply today.
It's great. I think it's great. It's great.
The all-new KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Great.
Make a note of it.
It's great.
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back and happy Fantopia Friday. I'm Erica Lukes. I was happy to be here, and I want to give a big shout out to everybody in chat. Thank you so much for being here, asking great questions, and a big thanks to Northern UFOs, who is helping me get the word out. If each and every one of you listening can share information about the show, that would be great, because I'm here for you every week. I pay for the honor to do this because I believe that this is the most important thing I will do with my life, and I am very vested in the fact that we've got to get good information to the public. There are, as all of you know, people that are either trying to stay relevant in the topic and making up information. There are disinformation agents. There's so much going on, but there are good, credible researchers out there. I always point you to Project Hestelin in Norway, because that is a beacon of what we should be doing here in America. So if you have a moment, please go to projecthestelin.org. Love it. My guest this evening is someone who is very accomplished, very humble, and does research like nobody else I know. I love it. His name is Ray Boeche, and he is a Nebraskan priest who had a clandestine meeting with the paraphysicists working for the DOD. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But Ray, before we went to break, you were just mentioning that you felt, and I love this, that we shouldn't be afraid. We should just approach whatever this is with respect. And I love that.
Yeah, I think we do ourselves a disservice if we if we turn our back on it. Because if there is a malevolent side to some of these things, I'd kind of like to know rather than just burying my head in the sand and hoping my backside isn't chewed off. So I think I think we need to approach it with respect. But what I'd begun to mention was the only time that I've really been terrified. And Dr. Berthold Schwartz was a psychiatrist and very interested in the paranormal. And he got called in to a situation with an MD, Herbert Hopkins, in Maine, who was investigating what eventually revealed itself as an early abduction event. And Hopkins had a very remarkable Men in Black experience where a stranger came to the door, threatened him, had a long, bizarre conversation with him, caused a coin to disappear from his hand. If you Google Herbert Hopkins MIB, you will find the story. But Berthold Schwartz mentioned this to me and wanted my thoughts on the story. And he said, I'll send you copies of everything I've got. I'd like you to look at it and see what you think. And so Bert was he's a fabulous man, one of the kindest, gentlest, and most astute people I've ever met. But he sent me a great deal of information, and Bert's handwriting was cryptic at the at the best. And so I'm trying to sort through all of this. And so I got two friends of mine, and we're going through in my bedroom. This is while I was still in college, going through this. And my bedroom had two windows that faced the east. And we're sitting at a table that we pulled out to sort these documents and papers. And we're facing away. Our backs are to the windows. And suddenly, as we're going through this, I noticed that there was something just didn't feel right. And we all three stopped doing what we were doing, sat there, and continued to look straight ahead for, I don't know, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Just this overwhelming sense of terror. And then it faded away. And the first thing I said was, don't say anything. Go write down what you just experienced. So we all wrote it down. All of us had felt this incredibly real sensation that something malevolent was behind us. And we were afraid to look because we were afraid of what we might see if we turned around. Well, that was the worst part, because I'm still I have no proof, but I'm convinced something was there. Don't know what it was. All three of us felt exactly the same, described it in almost identical terms. No idea, but when you take the whole Herbert Hopkins thing into account, it seems that there was probably a link there somehow. But that didn't dissuade me from continuing to dig into these things, because if there's something out there that can cause that kind of reaction, I want to know what it is. And if it is evil, I want to know, how do I stand against it? So it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
Well, and I love the fact that, I mean, your background is religion. I mean, this is your life, and yet you have a very grounded approach to this. You are not jumping on the demonic bandwagon. And thank you.
Well, no, I mean, I am absolutely certain of the existence of demonic entities, but you can't ascribe everything that happens. I mean, there's not a demon lurking behind every bush and under every rock, and unless you develop some abilities to discern what's really happening, you can either, as C.S. Lewis said, make one of two bad choices. Either assume that there is no such thing as the devil, or give him so much power that you're paralyzed. And I think we need to avoid that altogether. I've seen comments on various things that programs I've done and things I've written, people wanting to ascribe this idea to me that I believe everything about this is demonic, and I certainly don't. I think we need to recognize that spiritual reality, but until we see some of the underlying foundations behind some of these things, the best and most prudent thing we can do is to continue to investigate. Christianity gets a bad rap because some people don't like to think.
Some people. That is being very generous. I'm just kidding. I need to read more self-help books. What can I say? Yeah. No, but I mean, I will say that to me, I had Bishop Brian Ouellette come on my show. He was on about 7 months ago, and I mean, he is an exorcist and for the Catholic Church, and his approach was much like yours, very grounded, and a majority of these things are not demonic, and we've got to get out of this mindset, and there are things around us, and they've been around us, and we need to learn whether we can, interact with them or what it was just a very grounded approach. And I think that is needed, especially right now in ufology, because we're seeing people jumping to these end of times. The apocalypse is coming. This is demonic, and it's instilling a sense of fear in us. And I think that's a really dangerous road to go down.
Yeah. And I find it, as a pastor, as a trained theologian, I mean, I find it interesting that for some people, it seems their concept of God's power, His sovereignty, His wisdom, His mercy, His grace, seem to be really threatened by something else, and they almost create, rather than an eternal self-existent God, they have a very flawed view of God, and they try to they just have this sense that I have to do something because I need to help God out. And so they're so terrified of certain things that they seem to feel are outside of God's control. And that's not the God I find in Scripture. He doesn't explain everything about himself, but he explains enough to know he's in charge. And I think that's close enough. And my view of God is that he is there. He's a sustainer, not only a creator, but a sustainer of us. He's our Savior, and he's got it. He knows the whole story from beginning to end, and I don't get worried about the apocalypse. I don't. That's. Well, how does Paul put it? That's the great hope of the church, that Jesus is coming back and set everything straight. And I don't see that as a terrible thing. I think it's a very positive thing. But I also don't think we're called to sit around with a newspaper in one hand and a Bible in the other and try to predict the end of times is coming next week. That seems to be a pretty counterproductive thing when there are people out there that are hurting and they need to be loved and they need to be helped, and that seems a much better use of our time than to worry about the next boogeyman coming around the corner.
Well, and it's I think that, well, the end of times is coming. And so that means we're going to be selfish, like you're saying, and we won't reach out, or we won't try to make a difference in our community, or we won't. I mean, it's an excuse for a lot of people to behave pretty badly.
Yeah. Martin Luther was asked what he would do if he knew Jesus was coming back the next day. He said, I'd plant a tree. Yeah, implying I got to go on with life as normal because that's what I'm called to do. And if he comes back, he comes back. And there's nothing I can do to stop it. I'll be glad when he does, but I'm not going to put my life on hold thinking he might come back or hoping he might come back. He's going to come back when he comes back. And so I thought that was a very practical answer to that kind of end times hysteria.
Absolutely. And I will say that, you received your master's in theology from St. Mark's School of Divinity, right?
Yes.
Wow. And how old were you when you graduated?
No, I was an old man then. I was, I didn't start the program there until 1988, I believe. I was looking at, I won't go into the whole story. I had been accepted into Princeton Theological Seminary, and my wife decided she really felt that was not a good move. And the day we were going to put our house on the market, she convinced me of that as well. And so I was looking at the time for, this is pre-internet, a reputable school that had a distance program. And I found two. I found St. Mark's and I found Luther Rice Seminary in Georgia, because I had started an apologetics outreach to people involved in the New Age movement and the academic community. And I thought, I want to be well equipped to do this well. And so I found St. Mark's, and they had an interesting distance program, a very solid. And so with the help of three retired pastors at the church we were attending, who proctored all of my exams, I started taking classes. And then in 1991, graduated from St. Mark's, and they had a very interesting approach. They were insistent that you understand all the various branches of the Christian faith. And so we studied Reformed theology and Lutheran theology and Roman Catholic theology and Eastern Orthodox theology, Wesleyan theology, renewal theology, from the charismatic perspective. And we were expected to approach each of those as if we believed that, because their whole goal was to produce scholars and pastors and teachers who could understand where someone's coming from, what perspective, how they built their belief based on Scripture, and not just look down their nose at somebody and say, well, you're wrong, we're right, but have a balanced enough view. They say, well, I see exactly where you build that and how you come to that conclusion, but I disagree with you. And ultimately, they wanted people to be able to say, to have the grace to say, I see where you're coming from, and maybe I'm the one who's wrong. And I thought, it was just a great approach to a theological education, a much more balanced view than I could have found anywhere else. So it was a great treat. It was a great treat. And unfortunately, they ran into financial problems, and shortly after I graduated, they just weren't able to keep it going any longer. But it's certainly a great model for anyone who has lots of money and wants to begin a seminary of their own. I would recommend that. I'd recommend that model.
Wow, what an incredible experience. And no wonder you're so grounded in all of this and willing to look at all different sides. And I like that. And I have to ask you before we go to break, tell the listeners about eschatology, because that seems to be something that has popped up a lot lately in the UFO community.
It's early 90s. There was a lot of buzz about eschatology in the UFO community, and a seminar that was held here at the University of Nebraska by the Fortean Research Center under the direction at that time of Scott Colborn. I did a seminar and a presentation on eschatology and how it related to these the paranormal. There are various views of how the end times will unfold. There's premillennial, postmillennial, amillennial, and I always tell people I'm a pan-millennialist, which means I think it's all going to pan out in the end, because I don't think it's anything to get that excited about. Christ promised to come back. He's going to come back. I accept that. The rest I'll leave up to him. But there's a human desire to want to be in control, and I think that's what drives a lot of the eschatological thinking. We want to be able to pinpoint when these things are going to happen, and unfortunately, some people are very genuine about that, but some people are very much concerned with how can I make a buck off of this? And, as in the last 20 years, 30 years, the number of books that have been published predicting the sudden return of Christ, trying to set a date, trying to establish, well, when these things align and you hold your jaw just right, that's when Jesus is going to come back. I see as really bad attempts to just make money. And if we look at the end times from a Christian perspective, we know that we believe history has a beginning at the creation. We see, if you jump from page 1 of Genesis, it says, "In the beginning, God." We come to jump to the end of the book of Revelation, and we see a description of a new heaven and a new earth. Christ has come; he's redeemed the entire cosmos, and a new heaven and a new earth are in existence. Things are back the way they should be. That, in a nutshell, is the study of eschatology. What is going to happen? I don't know exactly how it's going to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I think we can see a pretty clear picture of what the end result will be. So I tend to not spend a lot of time worrying about eschatology. I've certainly researched it enough and spent enough time digging into the various ways to interpret prophecies from Daniel and Jesus' prophecies of the destruction of Jerusalem, and then the book of Revelation and what unfolds there. But I don't see that as I don't see it as a very productive use of my time, either as a theologian or as a researcher into the paranormal, other than being able to hopefully allay people's fears and say, look, if you're worried about this, let's talk about your relationship with God. And let's make sure you're okay with that, and then let God take care of what God can take care of. I hope I'm answering your question and not just rambling here. Does that?
No, you absolutely are. And I think that's beautifully put, and it's important because there is a pretty big faction that unfortunately has taken over ufology. And I think that's been so, at least from my research, since 1947 and onward, people trying to manipulate the topic and trying to instill fear and the end of times, and some people with perhaps not the best motives, either to make money or to control people and to really pull them away from researching the phenomenon. And I think that's something that needs to be really looked at for the sake of all of us and for the sake of the subject.
Yeah, I think when we look at when we encounter those kinds of views, I'm always drawn to look at one of two things, or both things, actually. The old saying, follow the money. And then I think the other thing we look at is, well, let's follow the power. Who would be behind this, who thinks in some way they're gaining some sort of power or control over a group of people or an individual? Both very suspect motives. And I have absolutely nothing against anyone making a decent living if they can from doing research like this. But to intentionally whip people, in a sense, into a frenzy, or to scare them for the sake of profit or the sake of control, I think we have to look at that. And I think that we need to stand against that, because the big question is not has absolutely nothing to do with either profit or power. It has to do with what's really going on here. And are we really interested in the truth, or are we using this as an excuse to further our own particular ends?
I just have to say I totally love everything that you're saying, and this is very timely. And I want to stress to my listening audience that you need to pay attention to this, because there is so much going on right now. And above all, I feel that we are, we're losing our personal power. And for me, and you have had personal experiences as well, I felt that it was a gift from me to make my life better, or to understand that there was something more going on. And I don't, you could start reading some of these things on the internet, or start believing what some of these groups think, and it minimalizes your own personal experiences that you'll never be able to explain to anybody else. But it disempowers people, and that's a problem to me. And I'm really happy that you feel the same way.
Yeah, I have never. I mean, I have never come away from a session with discussing someone's experiences. Just you could, across the entire range of paranormal phenomena.
And there's that music again. I know, I hate it when that happens. We will be right back, and we will talk about that. I am Erica Lukes, here with Dr. Ray Boeche. Stick around, because the best is yet to come, and trust me on that one.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows, visit her website at ufoclassified.com. UFO Classified. UFO Classified. This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51. Wait, that doesn't exist. This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
This landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazil was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to the second half of UFO Classified. I will be here next week with Rosemary Ellen Guiley. I can't wait for that show. It'll be a good time. I've got the next month planned out, and this will be off the hook. So I appreciate you all getting in, listening, sharing information, and tuning in. So please make sure to spread the word, and let's get good information there. My guest this evening is someone who I have been trying to get on, and his schedule has been so busy because he is a very kind person and helps a lot of people, but he's finally here. Dr. Ray Boeche, who has done a great deal with regard to the 1980 Bentwaters UK case, and he's also recognized for his extensive work in the area of animal mutilations, out-of-place animal sightings, Bigfoot reports, Men in Black, and occult religions and philosophies. He first came to my attention because of my friend Nick Redfern, who has been on the show before. Nick and Ray had a conversation, and that turned into the book Final Events. I look forward to talking about that because this is really interesting. And when we first went to break, when we were going to break, we were talking about kind of the end of times, the Christian perspective, and kind of following money, power, all of these things. And so, Ray, thank you so much again for being on the show. Yeah, you know how excited I've been because I've been texting you, just telling you.
Well, Erica, it's a treat. I wish I had more time to do this more often, but it's a treat, and I'll promise. Lord willing, I will be back and we'll do the show again sometime.
I know. And I feel very blessed that you're here. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And so I want to talk about the Collins Elite and the final events, because you have said, when you first had that conversation with Nick, that was something that the Collins Elite, that wasn't even on your radar. So tell us how all of that unfolded.
Yeah, the Collins Elite is something that I had absolutely no knowledge of until Nick published the book. We had talked about an incident that I had late 1991, early 1992, with two scientists who were working in weapons research and development for the Department of Defense. And the two men contacted me. They're both deceased now. They were who they said they were. And their motives seemed to be very pure. The nature of what they claimed, you just can't verify. And I thought I'd come to the end of it, but Nick found more. We met face to face, and they told me about a series of experiments that were being done, trying to weaponize psychic abilities, generally referred to as psychotronic warfare. There were black projects and white projects, meaning some for simply research sake, others, the black projects, to weaponize these abilities and to hopefully take them from a supranormal human ability and be able to use that electronically. The way they put it was that there was a division in the field of governmental paranormal research, who said that there are these black and white projects, but said there are no good paranormal research efforts because the approach they're taking is one that's inherently evil. And they talked about this growing awareness that this is dangerous work because they're trying to harness something spiritual, and they're interacting with what they termed non-human entities. These non-human entities, not what you would think they were. they had figured out a way to contact them. There were aspects of the UFO phenomenon within this, but there were also a great many aspects of the occult in this. Some ties to Aleister Crowley, Jack Parsons, a JPL scientist who was also an associate of Aleister Crowley, and L. Ron Hubbard. Parsons and Hubbard are maybe most infamous for an occult ritual they attempted called the Babylon Working, which took place just before the beginning of the modern UFO era. Maybe coincidence, maybe not, but very much an occult-based sort of approach. These non-human entities seemed to be assisting them, but then they realized that what was going on was inherently evil. One of them said they're neither benign nor neutral, but these entities are using us for some purpose. Fascinating story. That's about where I left it. They wanted to be put in contact with Linda Howe because they'd heard some of her broadcasts with Art Bell on Dreamland, and were aware of her work. And so they corresponded back and forth. I was sort of the middleman between these two gentlemen and Linda. And Linda wanted very badly to arrange a face-to-face meeting with them. And at the very end of the correspondence in 1992, they responded to her request that they couldn't do it because it was too dangerous for her and too dangerous for them. They feared for their families, and they feared for Linda's safety. An interesting story. There's more detail to that. If anyone's interested, you can read a much more detailed description if you go to academia.edu and Google my name. You'll come across my page with some papers there where I detail this. But the interesting thing was when Nick and I were talking about this, we had several long conversations, and Nick began to dig. And he actually found someone who referenced a group called the Collins Elite. And they mentioned, made reference to the fact that these two gentlemen had come to see me, and that I had been contacted for my input on this. I had never had heard the term Collins Elite. Don't know where it came from. I think I agree with Nick. I think it's an informal name. He used the example of the CIA being referred to as the company. I think that's a pretty accurate way to characterize the term Collins Elite. It's an offhand way of naming a program that is classified and probably couldn't be named with its actual title. It seems to be a substantial number of influential people who were involved with this. It's intriguing that this group of individuals are looking into it. The Collins Elite seem to. It's a very elusive thing. I've not yet determined whether they really want to completely end this. I don't know what their end game is. I think the research is still going on. I think it's probably much greatly advanced from where it was then. And that was in 1992. So gosh, that's 18 years ago. Where's the time go?
Well, look in the mirror, and that could answer that question. But
yeah, I notice that every time I shave.
Oh dear.
But the Collins Elite is, I think, an informal name for this governmental group who are intrigued by the paranormal and who want to weaponize it. Beyond that, I I have no details. I wish I knew more, but I just don't.
So and this is all so intriguing, but when you met with these gentlemen at the restaurant, you describe that meeting and what happened.
I was kind of puzzled because I wasn't quite sure why they wanted to come to me. And their reasoning was that, because I thought, why would you come to see a pretty obscure guy who's an Anglican priest in Nebraska when you could take this to the Washington Post or the New York Times? And their response was they wanted to run it by me because my background was very unique, because they were aware of the research I'd done in the field of ufology and the paranormal. They respected that, and they needed, because both of these gentlemen were Christians, they wanted a Christian perspective on this, and someone with a Christian perspective to be able to judge it and take a look at it. So I still thought they were probably much better qualified people than me, but they began to explain this. It was an interesting meeting. It was something that I think, as I characterized it in my original notes, it was very, I almost want to say scripted, but it was very concise. They'd obviously put a lot of time and thought into how they wanted to explain this. I was allowed to take notes. I was told at times, don't take notes when we talk about this. It was very interesting. They began by detailing kind of the historical background, things that had been done, things that the Soviet Union had done, or that at least we believed that the Soviet Union had done. They mentioned some of the things that Tom Bearden, physicist and retired colonel, talked about in his book, The Excalibur Briefing, weaponizing these things, psychotronic phenomena. And they mentioned things from, literally, in their words, black magic to hyperspatial nuclear howitzers, weapons capable of exploding a nuclear device, but by paranormal means and duplicating the blast in a number of other locations. Just incredible things. And then they got into some of their theoretical basis for this, based on some of the research that David Boehm, a British mathematician, had done on something called enfoldment. Basically, the simplest way to explain it is everything that's happened is still happening, and it can be recorded. It's just like you drop two pebbles into a pond, and each pebble will send out a series of ripples, and where those ripples intersect, if you can extrapolate the information from those interference patterns, you can recreate exactly what that pebble looked like. That is the idea of the hologram, which Boehm was essential in developing. And so they're looking for these interference patterns and how human brains can process them, how these interference patterns can be used to tap into psychokinetic abilities, things of that nature. And so, again, they wanted, the point of the program was to weaponize these things, to be able to kill people at a distance, to be able to affect equipment, mechanical systems, and so on at a distance, with only the power of thought, or, as I mentioned earlier, a technology to reproduce that. And this is what brought them into contact with these non-human entities, these NHEs. The very disturbing part about that, the NHEs were, they never explained exactly how they'd come into contact with them, but I got the impression that there were some very, very strange Aleister Crowley-like occult rituals that were done in order to attract the attention of these beings and get establish contact with them. They stated that even though they were involved with the work, that even when they seemed to be able to harness or channel these forces or these abilities that the NHEs helped them develop for good uses, this force would turn on them. And that ultimately all of the subject involved suffered from varying degrees of negative effects from contact with these things. And they were convinced that what was being tapped into in all instances was evil and that the research needed to cease. So that's in a nutshell what was going on. I took notes. I listened carefully. I asked a few questions. Some they would answer, some they didn't. That's where we left it. And I started to dig to see if I could verify who these men were, if they were actually who they claimed to be. And I was able to chase that down. And we had off and on contact for a limited amount of time. And I asked them, I said, can I share any of this information? And they said, certainly, you just can't mention who we are. So I began to put the information out there because I thought, I don't know what to do with this. I want people to be aware of it. I want to see what else see if someone else can uncover more. So I put the information out there, and it was there from 1992 on, and it wasn't until 2007, 2008 that Nick stumbled across it and took an interest and began to dig again and uncovered another layer of the onion, which was the Collins elite.
And this just gets more intriguing by the moment. But when you were at that initial meeting, and I believe it was at the Cornhusker?
Yes.
Were you shown photographs?
I was.
And can you describe what you were shown?
They were photos of what seemed to be deceased people who were volunteers in various experiments to try to perform what they termed negative healing, which seems to me to be a great euphemism for killing people from a distance, psychically. One person had been, according to them, had been suffocated from a distance, no physical contact. Another one appeared to have had their skull crushed, again from a distance. Each of the victims, if indeed they were victims, were seated in something that the closest I could compare it to is something like a dentist's chair, and some electronic equipment around them. And one, the third one had allegedly had their heart stopped by psychic means. So you go back to, I remember how laughable it was when it came out, the Men Who Stared at Goats, detailing exactly this kind of project, and they were trying to stop the hearts of goats psychically, and that's exactly what had been shown to me allegedly in these photographs. Very disturbing to see that, particularly to know that, and again, if this is true, that these people had allegedly volunteered to take part in this, knowing that might be the outcome. I wonder about that. I've often wondered, were these unwilling victims, unwitting victims? I don't know. But it was an interesting and kind of macabre story to hear, and especially when you had the photographic evidence there as well.
And so when they presented you with the photographs, like how did they go about that?
They just said, here's part of the experiment. This is what we're doing. This is one reason we think it's so evil. And then as they handed me the photographs, they explained then the situation for each of the victims, and how the alleged cause of death, and said this is what the government's doing. We think it needs to stop, and we're afraid.
And so how did they mention how they were able to obtain these photographs to get them out there to you? I
had the feeling that they were involved in a very direct way with these actual experiments, and that they had probably taken great risk in getting those photos, taking them out of whatever secure facility they were in, and showing them to me. And again, this is with the assumption that this is legitimate.
Right.
As I've said from the beginning, I have no idea. I have no way to prove or disprove this. All I can go on is the word of these men, and they were who they said they were. I kind of left it there. It began to get very interesting again, though, when Nick wrote Final Events, and when he'd uncovered this group that referred to themselves to him as the Collins Elite. So it's like, okay, here's another verification that what these gentlemen said is true, actually happened, and maybe is still ongoing.
Oh, interesting. And I hear that break music. And of course, we've got much more to talk about. I am Erica Lukes here on UFO Classified with Dr. Ray Boeche. Stick around. We've got one more segment, and you will not want to miss this. We will be right back.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
With Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
1 million miles till midnight. A story of timelines, artificial worlds, simulated races, and the galactic imprint, and the destiny of a blue world called Earth. 1 million miles till midnight, written by Solaris Blue Raven, is a journey through the mind's eye which allows the reader to surf a wave of technological and multidimensional intellect, revealing a bridge between conscious design and the truth. A multidimensional bleed-through awakens the world of artificial intelligence to set sail into the frontiers of a vast multiverse, morphing planets and terraforming ascended worlds beyond the linear programs of a fated race. 1 million miles till midnight will awaken, inspire, prepare, and enlighten one to the many multidimensional states of consciousness and worlds we reside in. With every cell and atom, we are this truth and multiverse. 1 million miles till midnight. Written by Solaris Blue Raven. Available now at Amazon.com. Don't wait. Get your copy today.
It's great. I think it's great. It's great.
The all-new KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Great. Please make a note of it. It's great.
If ever a breed was affectionate to a fault, it's the Golden Retriever. They're people dogs, pure and simple. And the Golden Retriever Rescue of Southern Nevada needs your help. If you would like to volunteer, foster, adopt, or donate, go to the Golden Retriever Rescue of Southern Nevada's website at grrsn.org. That's grrsn.org. Or call 598-GOLD. That's 598-GOLD.
Gee, it's so quiet. Too quiet. Terribly quiet. Awfully quiet.
Do you have an hour to kill? Well, crank up those EVPs, spirit boxes, and walk the haunted halls of the unknown with UK's very own paranormal investigator, David Cook.
You guys ready for this?
The Ghostly Hour, live Sunday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern.
And now, you're mine.
Come hear first-hand accounts of some of the most famous ghost sightings, photos, and videos from around the world. Skeptics, believers, and spirits, both good and bad. Welcome to the Ghostly Hour, hosted by David Cook. Live every Sunday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back, and thanks for tuning in to KCOR. I'm Erica Lukes. Always happy to be here. I want to give a big shout out to Tina Marie, who is the best station owner, the best producer. I am very grateful to be here on KCOR. And again, a shout out to my friends who are listening and getting information out there. I am here, and this has been an interview that I've anticipated for a long, long time, because I've been digging into the Collins elite and the work of Dr. Ray Boeche, who has done extensive research on the Men in Black, on Rendlesham, on all of these things. And I will give you links about his research, because it's really pivotal. And most people, I think, that enter the UFO field don't have a clue, and they are not given very meaty research. And Dr. Ray Boeche has certainly done that. When we left for break, we were talking about the Collins elite, David Boeche, satanic rituals. And then on the break, we were talking a little bit about the Collins elite and perhaps human sacrifices. So if you could give us more information about that, that would be great.
I'll just read from my original preface to my notes that have been out in the public since 1992. The gentleman told me, and I wrote, I was told that their willingness to divulge this information was the result of a moral dilemma. These two individuals, both Christians, became alarmed at the uses to which their research was being placed under the direction of their unnamed superiors. They described the development of an obsessive effort to contact and attempt to control what they referred to as non-human intelligences or non-human entities, and to harness these for military and intelligence use. The efforts had progressed well past attempts at practical applications of David Boehme's theories, and had grown to encompass the use of, according to their statements, satanic rituals and ritual magic along the lines of that espoused by Aleister Crowley, including human sacrifices. So that's, as we talked about on the break, what do you do with that?
And so when you were shown the pictures, I mean, that was obviously their way of trying to show you what they had conjured up and what they were doing.
Yeah, I think it was an effort to show, and I think probably in terms of danger to themselves and their careers at the very least, if not their lives, a very brave thing to reveal those photographs. But I think they were. My impression was they really wanted to drive home the fact this is real and there are real deadly consequences to it.
And so there must be, since, I've heard things you have, people still believe that the Collins elite is very active and that there may be just key individuals from different places that meet every once in a while. But are they, obviously they can't be true Christians, or they wouldn't be engaging in what they're be engaging in.
That was the big dilemma for me. And their only response was, well, this is not what they had signed on for, but this is where the line of research that their superiors had led them into had come in. That was the moral dilemma that they had. Again, the impression I had was these men were not responsible for instance, the deaths of those 3 individuals, but their research was. And what their research had been able to develop was used to, whether willingly or not, take the lives of these 3, allegedly take the lives of these 3 individuals. And that was their moral dilemma, that their good use, their good work had been put to an evil use. And there was this overarching spiritual element to it as well. I mentioned on another show last night along with Nick Redfern, I said it's much the same thing as they came to the realization, I think, with the same thing that Robert Oppenheimer did at the Trinity test when he said, "I'm become death, the destroyer of worlds," when he saw the tremendous destructive power of the atomic bomb. I think that's kind of where they were. They had started out with the goal of pure research, and they had seen the disastrous effects that could come from it.
And so these 2 gentlemen were showing you these photos, and I want to just ask you, and I asked you this when we had our private conversation, tell me the sexes of the people in the photographs and what they were dressed like. You mentioned the dental chairs.
There were 2 men and a woman. They were dressed in a coverall type, almost like an Air Force coverall flight suit sort of thing. Not an actual pilot's flight suit, but just kind of a khaki colored. I would assume they were black and white photos, but a khaki colored coverall. No markings, no insignias, nothing like that, and they're all dressed identically. And that's, I don't know what else I can tell you.
And was there anything else? Were the pictures of them, were they taken looking straight at them? Was there anything else in the background? And how long did you look at the photos? They
handed me the photos, kind of told me the story of each one as I looked through them. I probably had them, I don't know, 2, 3, maybe 4 minutes as they told the story. Each photo looked like it had been taken from the same vantage point, which makes me assume that maybe there was a camera that was set there for all these experiments. Kind of a 3/4 view. The individuals were all reclined at about the same position that you would find yourself in if you sat in an actual recliner and rocked back to the first full stop. About that position, kind of a 3/4 view from the front right of the individuals. There was banks of equipment in the background. You could see, I couldn't identify any things with lights on them, instrumentation of some type. But it was generally, the frame was pretty much taken up by the chair and the figures in the chair.
And after you saw those photos, I can't imagine your heart must have just sank. When you were looking at them, or if you remember, because everything probably happened so quickly, when they gave you those photos, what were they doing and what was their reaction when they gave you the photos?
They were, I would say, I guess the best way to describe it, I think they had committed to getting this information out. They seemed, and again, I'm certainly aware of the possibility of disinformation. They seemed very sincere about it, and I believe they genuinely felt a sense of remorse and a sense of disgust at showing what had happened with the use of their work. But that was the reality, and the implication was this is ongoing and it's going to continue on, and we don't know how to stop it, but we think people need to be aware.
And so do you have any indication of where these experiments were taking place?
Absolutely none. Absolutely none. I know where these two gentlemen at times would be working. And that was at what's now Stratcom headquarters, the Strategic Air Command headquarters at Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha. That's what they happened to be here, and we're here on a periodic basis as they would visit and I'm assuming oversee various science projects and research projects that the Science and Research Office at SAC headquarters had in the works. And that's when they took the opportunity then to come down from Omaha to visit with me.
And so do you have any idea or a guess as to what branch of government wanted to weaponize it?
No, I don't. Okay. I would, all I can say is the Department of Defense. I don't know who was, they gave no indication of who was behind it. The interesting thing, excuse me, that a lot of people didn't realize at the time, SAC was Strategic Air Command, the base there, the headquarters, is comprised of much more than just the Air Force. There were also naval personnel there. There were also a contingent of CIA personnel there. They had what one officer who I became friends with, who was stationed there, was essentially a spy school. They taught a lot of photographic interpretation and that sort of things to CIA operatives and CIA agents. And so there was a big mix there. And now that it's Stratcom, it's an equal mix, I think, roughly equal mix between Air Force and naval and possibly Army folks as well. But so it's not exclusively an Air Force base. But again, I have no idea what particular branch of the military was behind this, if it was a particular branch and not just the Department of Defense in general.
And so when you look now at some of the things that are at play, and I know that it has been suggested by some, although I don't necessarily agree with this, that what we're seeing with little bits and pieces of disclosure, that is still, that could be, related to the Collins elite, which I don't necessarily think is the case. So what are your thoughts on what's taking place now with disclosure, and where do you think the Collins elite are still active? And it's a loaded question.
I think my gut feeling is that they are probably still active, that this project is ongoing. And I have nothing other than my instinct that tells me that. I have no direct contact with anyone that can prove or disprove that. But I would imagine it's still going on. There may be a link between some of this research and the two projects that were named when the Washington Post and New York Times published the Tic Tac UFO film. But I don't know that. I don't know that for certain. I don't know if we can draw a firm link between and I'm particularly fascinated by the Tic Tac UFO film to see an object behave in such a way that the pilots can't comprehend how it can do what it's doing, but yet they're filming it while it's doing these remarkable things, seemingly defying our laws of physics and certainly doing things that no human body could withstand the stresses that would be placed on it. That makes me wonder, okay, so how does that fit in with non-human entities? How does that fit in with the whole idea of psychotronic weaponry? I don't know. I don't know where disclosure is going to go. I've been in this game for a long time, and I've seen a lot of excitement build at various times over the idea disclosure is going to happen. It's going to happen, and it really hasn't yet. I would like to think that this might be the beginning of it, but again, I've been disappointed so many times in the past. I'll just wait and see, and we'll see what happens.
Right.
It would be great to have some information come out, some solid information.
Right. And so you mentioned earlier in the interview that when this group first started to contact these NHEs, that they felt that it was positive, but then the behavior turned negative. Do you think that perhaps this intelligence can pretty much surmise what the person trying to get this information is all about, and that is why they perhaps might be negative in their interaction?
You know, I've looked at that from a number of different angles, and from my particular area of expertise, if I look at it from a spiritual and theological point of view, let's, for the sake of argument, say these non-human entities are demonic. Demons are created creatures, fallen angels. They are not omniscient. They are limited. So could they read people's minds? Possibly. I don't know. But they would certainly have a deep understanding of human frailties and human desires, and would be able to play on the desire for wealth and fame and power and strength in order to seduce people into accepting these are good things. And then it's only once the noose is around the neck does it start to tighten, and things start to go wrong.
And I mean, this is interesting. And I look at, the different areas where you've got these, the window areas, Skinwalker Ranch, different places. I mean, it seems like people go into these areas and they're scientists and they want to explore this, but they're looking at it from a very black and white perspective, which I think is admirable. And I wish I could do that. But is there, in the back of all of this, like we've seen with the Collins elite, is there perhaps, we know people want to weaponize this, and for me, I believe that whatever this intelligence is, and I think it's a plethora of things, that it can read that and it will react accordingly. Maybe that's a hope of mine.
Yeah, well, I think it's a question of, again, and I don't know a better way to put it than this. As our scientific knowledge grows, much like the warnings that Stephen Hawking and others have made about the potential threat of artificial intelligence, the question that we never ask ourselves is, should we do this? We always say, can we do this? Can we achieve this? But we very seldom say, should we? Because just because we can doesn't mean we should. And so I think that's much the case with this, because you can access these non-human entities, because you can perform these acts of negative healing. Does that mean you should? Is it, we have to make a judgment call. You can use a 30-06 rifle to feed your family. You can also use it to create great harm and mayhem and take the lives of others. We can do it with it, but should we? And I think that's maybe the best analogy I can draw, the question that needs to be asked in situations like this.
Oh, wow. And so after, when you had mentioned earlier that when Nick started to dig into this again, that there were things that happened that things kind of picked up as far as the intensity. Again, we've got a couple minutes until the show's over, but what would that be? I mean, what happened?
Oh, as Nick began to investigate?
Yes. Yeah.
He found a lot of very interesting things, and the one that was most significant, obviously to me, was one of the people, informants, I guess you could call them, one of the contacts he developed, seemed very knowledgeable about the gentleman I had spoken with, and so I found that and seemed to indicate that. What they had told me was part of the story and an accurate part of the story. So I found that interesting. There have been a number of things over the years where you begin to wonder, am I paranoid, or is there something going on? And and I think of the old saying, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they aren't out to get you. And I've wondered at times some issues with phone lines, with electronics, things of that nature. You wonder if somebody's keeping an eye on you, and I believe that that's probably the case. I was told by Senator Jim Exon's defense aide when I was deep in the middle of researching Bentwaters that a packet of material had been delivered to my home. And I'd been very careful. We weren't in the city directory. This is pre-internet, unpublished telephone number, no address in the phone book. And I only used a post office box for all of that correspondence. And suddenly this shows up at my home. And I called the defense aide and asked him why. And he stuttered and stammered and said, we have a file on you here that's just huge. It must have been in there. And so I think for a number of reasons, I think Scott Colborn and myself, as we dug into the Bentwaters thing with Senator Jim Exon, I think we gathered the attention of someone or some organization. And I would guess that they check us out every once in a while just to see what's going on, what we might be involved in.
Well, and I would say that obviously we know the UFO community has been monitored for decades for very good reasons. And I get that, but this is, oh, wow. This is going to take me a while to digest. And I've been looking into this and your work for a long, long time. And I am very grateful that you were here tonight. And if people want to find your work, where would people go?
The best place they could locate it is to go to academia.edu, academia.edu, and Google my name, or just actually Google my name and academia.edu, and that should take you to a number of my papers.
Thank you so much. I love it. I need to talk to you more because you've got so much information. Thank you, Dr. Ray Boeche, for being here finally. And I want to say, stick around. Yes, this is like a highlight of my life. You have no idea.
Well, Erica, it's been a pleasure. This has been a great time together, and I'm happy to be able to do it.
Well, I can't wait for you to come back again. And I want to tell all of my listeners, thank you for getting information out. Stick around for the Paradigm Matrix. Dr. Rita Louise will be on with Willie Miranda. That's awesome. So stick around. And next week, I will have Rosemary Ellen Guiley on the show. And she has some interesting things to say as well. It's going to be a great month. I have got guests lined up that you would not believe. So make sure you tune in, get the word out. I'm Erica Lukes. Have a wonderful and safe weekend.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at UFOclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south